Chapter 6. Why don't you go to heaven? Seeing the two walking towards him, Stephen smiled bitterly, and it was hard to pretend not to see them. As soon as he was about to say hello, he heard his sister-in-law Hazel questioning, "Stephen, to be honest, do you know the seniors of the Matrix Heights group? Yesterday, I went back and thought for a long time." Hazel and her daughter still doubt that Stephen, whom they have always looked down on, might really know the seniors of the Electron group, or Secretary Lou could not be so polite to Stephen. If Stephen really knows the senior executives of the Matrix Heights group, then let Stephen come forward and say something good. Maybe Demelza's business will really have a chance to be negotiated. Yes. Stephen nodded. Demelza and Hazel's eyes lit up when they heard, and they put on a pair of smiling faces instantly. "Oh, I didn't expect my son-in-law to be so prosperous. Tell Mom, which senior do you know?" Demelza stared at Stephen with excitement. This moment was the most pleasing to her eyes for Stephen in recent years. The sister-in-law Hazel also looked at Stephen with excitement. In her eyes, for the first time in the past few years, Stephen was her real brother-in-law. "I only know Thomas," Stephen said truthfully. In the entire Matrix Heights group, he really only knew Thomas. As for all the executives in the Matrix Heights group, he did not know any of them. "You kid, how do you speak? You want to be called the richest man in Lu?" Although Demelza had an educated tone of Stephen, her face was full of smiles. "My son-in-law knows the richest man Lu, so my chances of success in his big business are even greater." Stephen shrugged, a little speechless. "By the way, brother-in-law, what is the relationship between you and the richest man Lu?" Olivia asked curiously. "Thomas is my housekeeper." "By the way, Mom, did you go to Electron Group yesterday to discuss business? Did the talk go well? Would you like me to help?" Seeing the mother-in-law's change in her attitude, Stephen, "I am also very happy. Even if they used to have a lot of complaints about themselves, they were their mother-in-law after all, and he didn't want to care about them." But when the two of Demelza heard him, their entire faces went black in an instant. "The first richest man in St. David is your housekeeper, why don't you go to heaven?" The mother and daughter agreed that Stephen came to make them happy. "The richest man in Lu is your butler? Then I am still the world's richest man in Forbes." Hazel sneered, sarcastically. "Okay, you Stephen, do you have the courage? Even I dare to start a shave." Demelza was also angry. It may be that the hope that came back was shattered, making her hate Stephen like never before. Stephen couldn't laugh or cry. Why doesn't anyone believe the truth? "If you don't take good care of Moana, where are you going to fool around?" Demelza asked sharply. "Moana is asleep, I will come out to eat," Stephen said truthfully. "Eat, eat, you know how to eat, and sooner or later, you will die to death." Demelza snorted and took Hazel into the hospital. She came over today. Besides questioning Stephen, she also took a look at her granddaughter. Looking at the backs of Demelza and Hazel, Stephen spread his hands, but still took out the phone and called Thomas. "Uncle Thomas, is Brent Pharma recently talking to you about a business?" "The person in charge is Demelza, their deputy sales director," Stephen asked. "The temperature has been a bit high recently. The company is planning to buy a batch of anti-heatstroke drugs and distribute 2 bottles to each employee. As for which pharmaceutical company to buy from, I don't know," Thomas said. "Well, if it is Demelza from Brent Pharma, buy hers," Stephen said. "Okay. By the way, Master wants to see you. If you have time, Master can fly over that day," Thomas said. Stephen was startled, and said in silence, "I don't want to see him yet." Thomas sighed and said, "The things that happened back then were not entirely to blame for the Master, and the Master was very guilty all these years. Do you know why the Master has not remarried for 10 years? Because the Master feels sorry for you and his wife. And knows that you are here. After St. David, the Master sent me to St. David to establish the Matrix Heights group. The reason why I have not been looking for you is because the Master knows your temper and said that unless you are in desperation, let me not disturb your life." Stephen trembled. Since ran away from home 10 years ago, he has not asked about his father again, nor has he received a call from his father. Of course, even if he receives it, he will hang up. What makes his heart tremble is that when his mother died 10 years ago, his father was only 36. He has not remarried even now. In the past 10 years, did he really live in guilt? There was a silence for a while before Stephen slowly said, I'll talk about it when my daughter is cured. After all, it is his father, and he also wanted to drive over the years, the death of his mother. More or less accidents, father was just careless temporarily. Okay, I will tell the master right away, the master must be very happy to hear it. Thomas said excitedly. He came to St. David for 10 years and became the richest man in St. David. In addition to helping his young master at a critical moment, he mainly waited for today's young master to change his mind. After Stephen hung up the phone, he went to the small noodle shop outside the hospital and ordered a bowl of small noodles. As soon as he was about to eat, he saw his sister-in-law Hazel calling. Stephen, Moana is gone, come back soon. Hazel said anxiously. Stephen smiled and said, Moana has been transferred to the VIP area on the 19th floor, in room 2. What? Did you transfer Moana to the VIP area? Where does the money come from? Hazel asked. Borrowed. Stephen said lightly. Anyway, he didn't believe what he said, so there is no need to explain too much. Then what do you do when you find a bone marrow that matches Moana? Hazel asked. Don't worry, I won't borrow from you, I have my own way. Thinking of the scene where he failed to borrow money from Demelza a year ago and was directly bombarded by Demelza, Stephen vowed that he would never do it again in his life. He spoke to the old man's family. Like a prodigal like you, my old lady won't lend you. Demelza's cold snort rang on the phone, and Stephen hung up. This rubbish, dare to hang up my phone, it's really anti-spirit. Demelza was very unhappy and returned the phone to her daughter, and took her to the 19th floor. After finding the VIP area, seeing that Stephen had even hired a professional nurse to take care of Moana, Demelza scolded a few prodigal words in her heart. The two sat there for a while, and Moana woke up. Although Demelza and Hazel didn't wait to see Stephen, they felt distressed for Moana from the bottom of their hearts. There was nothing in the afternoon. The two had planned to accompany Moana more, but before long, Demelza's phone rang. After she answered the phone, she kissed Moana a few times excitedly. Mom, who did it? Hazel asked curiously. The manager of the Matrix Heights group said that we should talk about cooperation in the afternoon. Demelza said excitedly. Ah, great. Congratulations to my mother, I finally won the Grand Order of the Matrix Heights group. Hazel also said excitedly. Managers and said that he didn't want our medicines, but there was a noble person who helped us speak. The richest man Lu directly made the decision, but I don't know who helped us with this great favor, so I have to thank the next person. Demelza said. Will it be? A figure appeared in Hazel's mind, a little confused. Chapter 7. Why does no one believe the truth? You mean Mark? Demelza asked. Hazel nodded, not quite sure. It should not be him. After all, managers and didn't have much enthusiasm for Mark yesterday. Demelza shook his head. Who would it be? The one who can speak for us in front of Rich Thomas shows that his status are not low, right? There is no such noble person in my impression. Hazel was also puzzled. The mother and daughter fell into conjecture for a while, but they didn't even think that they were Stephen's help. In their hearts, Stephen is a useless waste. Of course it is impossible to have anything to do with Lu Xiao's wealth. If there is something to be involved, then both of them are named Lu. Well, no matter what, let's sign the contract first, and then ask managers and about the identity of the other party. Demelza said. At this time, Stephen had a good meal. Seeing Demelza and the two smiling faces, he knew that Junyu should have called them. Take good care of Moana, we went to the Junyueden contract. Demelza was in a good mood, and her tone of voice was much better than before. Stephen nodded. Just as Demelza and the two were about to leave, Hazel's phone rang. After she answered, she said, Mom, wait a minute, Mark came to see Moana. She has already arrived at the hospital. Soon Mark came in with a small basket of fruit. It was imported dragon fruit, which children like to eat too. Mark's gaze towards Stephen has also changed a little today, not the way he looked down on people like yesterday. It's no wonder, who told them that they ate at Junyu yesterday, but the secretary of the richest man in Stephen respected Stephen so much. Like Demelza, he also thought of Stephen's identity yesterday. Abnormal. But Mark didn't say anything, and Stephen didn't say anything. He knew that Mark didn't come to see his daughter specially, and there was no need to thank him. By the way, Mark, did you ask your dad to come forward? Managers of the Matrix Heights group just called my mother and said that we should go over the contract and buy my mother's medicines. Hazel asked suddenly. She still felt that only Mark could help her mother. Huh. Mark was slightly startled, and said to his heart that my dad had such a big face, and even if he personally asked my dad to come forward, he would not *ck me. I said yesterday that managers and didn't give Milda face, other people should have helped us. Seeing Mark's reaction, Demelza said. Hazel also nodded, looking at Mark with a little disappointment. Aunt Demelza, has managers and called you? It seems that my dad's actions are still very fast. I just told him this morning and asked him to do me this favor. He said he would find a time today. When I went to see managers and I thought he was sending me. Mark just entangled in his heart and admitted frankly. Anyway, he is not afraid of being exposed in the end. Even if he will be exposed in the future, he had already won Hazel at that time and didn't care anymore. The most important thing is that he suspects that the Matrix Heights group is optimistic about the cooperation with Demelza, so he called her today. In this way, it will basically not be exposed. It just so happened that Hazel suspected that it was him, and by the way, he gave this power to greed, one step closer to taking Hazel. Oh, you really asked your dad to intercede, thank you so much. Hazel looked at Mark with a little excitement, and said that apart from Mark, no one could help her mother. Up. Milda, thank you so much. Demelza was also a little excited, but it was really Mark. Stephen looked at Mark in surprise, but he didn't expect this kid to be so shameless. Are you sure that your father really helped my mother? Stephen looked at Mark with a smile. Stephen looked at Mark in surprise. He didn't expect this kid to be shameless to this point. Are you sure that your father really helped my mother? Stephen looked at Mark with a smile. Stephen looked at Mark in surprise. He didn't expect this kid to be shameless to this point. Are you sure that your father really helped my mother? Stephen looked at Mark with a smile. Mark's mind was shocked, and his eyes were a little flustered. It's not Mark's help, is it still you? Do you have this ability? Hazel stared at Stephen with an unhappy expression, her eyes full of contempt. Don't pay attention to him, let's sign the contract first. Demelza also gave Stephen a contemptuous look, and then took Hazel and Mark out. Stephen sneered in his heart, shook his head, too lazy to worry about whether Mark's character is good or not, and he has nothing to do with him. Dad, why are my aunt and grandmother so fierce to you? Moana looked at Stephen suspiciously. Stephen smiled, not knowing how to answer for a while. Of course, he cannot say that it is because they feel that they are very useless. In front of their daughter, they still have to pass positive energy. The next day, Thomas finally found the bone marrow that matched Moana, and the hospital immediately performed an operation on Moana. The operation was very successful, and Moana was recovering well, so that Olivia was so happy that he forgot to ask about the follow-up operation fees and the cost of Stephen changing Moana to the VIP area. In the 2 days after Moana recovered and was discharged from the hospital, Olivia specially asked for 2 days off to accompany her daughter. Moana is now over 3 years old and can send her to kindergarten. Also, what are your plans? Olivia asked Stephen before turning off the lights. What's your plan? Stephen was thinking about other questions, but didn't pay attention to Olivia's words. If you owe so much money, don't you think of a way to make money back? Olivia frowned. I owe Charlie 50,000, and I will pay him back in 2 days. Stephen said. Okay, Stephen, do you mean that all the hundreds of thousands of expenses behind Moana will be paid by me at work? Olivia turned and looked at Stephen, who was smoking on the pillow with a face the frost. She didn't expect Stephen to be so unacceptable. Is this still her man? What are you excited about? When did I say I want you to pay it back? All the expenses behind are my money. I only owe Charlie the 50,000. Stephen cried and laughed. Your money? The following expenses are at least more than £500,000, right? Do you treat me as a fool? Olivia said angrily. My wife, let me tell you the truth. Actually, I am a rich second generation. Stephen put out his cigarette butt, turned around and put his arms around Olivia's shoulder, preparing to tell her his identity. I also want to make up for the hardship Olivia has suffered for him over the past few years. Go away, don't touch me. Olivia furiously pushed Stephen away, angrily said. Stephen, you really let me down, just to not go to work to make money. You came up with such a ridiculous excuse. Are you still a man? I will leave it here tonight. I don't care if you go to work or not. Anyway, as long as someone comes to collect debts, I will divorce you immediately. Olivia opened the quilt and got out of bed. She was really angry. For love, even if Stephen failed to start a business, even if her daughter experienced a lot of despair during the hospitalization period, she just complained to Stephen. But now, in order not to go to work to make money, Stephen finds out such a ridiculous excuse, which makes her extremely disappointed. What are you doing? Stephen asked silently. Sleep in separate rooms. Olivia snorted and opened the door and went out. Looking at Olivia closing the door with a bang, Stephen really couldn't laugh or cry. Why doesn't anyone believe me every time I tell the truth? Chapter 8. Buying clothes for Moana the next day, Olivia went to work normally. She might still be angry with Stephen. She went out without even cooking for breakfast. Stephen got up to make breakfast, and after eating with Moana, he took Moana to the kindergarten. Interim, the principal wanted to make things difficult. However, Stephen directly stuffed him with a bank card, saying that there was 100,000 in it. The director of the park didn't check it, so he readily agreed. Moana, Dad will take you to buy 2 new clothes first, and then I will come here to study tomorrow. Stephen walked towards the mall holding Moana's hand. Okay, I want to buy the most beautiful one. The set my grandma bought me last time was not pretty at all. Moana said happily. Well, today Dad will buy you the most beautiful one. Stephen smiled slightly. Dad, I have to pick it myself. Moana said. Well, whichever item our little princess fancy, Dad will buy you which one. Stephen said and picked up Moana. Moana had only been discharged from the hospital for a few days, and Stephen couldn't bear to let her go too much. Road. Soon after arriving at Oldwood Commercial Building, Stephen took Moana directly to the children's clothing store. The Oldwood Commercial Building has 3 floors selling clothing, all imported goods such as luxury goods, as well as food, movie theaters, and entertainment centers, which are very lively. Dad, Auntie. Moana suddenly pointed to a women's clothing store nearby and said. Stephen turned his head to look, and saw Hazel and her classmates coming out of the women's clothing store. Auntie, Auntie. Moana shouted to Hazel and others. Hazel heard Moana's voice and walked over with a smile. Moana, come and hug Auntie. Hazel held Moana in her arms. Auntie, are you here to buy new clothes too? Dad also brought me to buy new clothes. Moana said. Yes, my aunt will also buy you a new dress. Hazel said. Wow, Hazel, is this your sister's child? It's so pretty. A few of Hazel's classmates gathered around, and a girl smiled and touched Moana's face. Moana gave in with a disgusting expression, and amused several girls laughing. Auntie, I want my father to hug. Moana watched a few strangers round her making fun, and suddenly she didn't want to be in Hazel's arms. Moana, my aunt will take you to buy new clothes and ignore your dad. Hazel coaxed. No, I want Dad. Moana twisted her body, wanting Hazel to let her down. Hazel had no choice but to pass Moana to Stephen, and when her gaze swept across Stephen's face, a flash of contempt flashed. Stephen didn't want to take care of Hazel, so he hugged Moana and walked to the children's clothing store. Stephen, the children's clothing in this store is all brand name clothing imported from Italy. The cheapest one is several £1,000s. Can you afford it? Hazel frowned, behind her back. Shouted. She knew that Stephen had not gone to work anymore, and all the money she used was from her. The most important thing is that in order to treat Moana, Stephen has borrowed hundreds of thousands. Seeing that Stephen buys children's clothing is so wasteful, he is immediately a little annoyed. I can afford it. Stephen said lightly. You can afford it. Hazel caught up with Stephen and said sarcastically, you bought such expensive clothes for Moana, have you told my sister? Stephen was too lazy to take care of her and walked directly into the children's clothing store. Hazel, your brother-in-law is very rich. I heard that the minimum number of children's clothing in this children's clothing store is several thousand pieces. A girl said. He has some ghost money. Mark sneered and said sarcastically, I heard that he now owes hundreds of thousands of debts, and he didn't go to work. All he eats is from Hazel's salary. Huh? Men don't go to work and let women earn money to support him. The girl who just reached out to touch Moana's face was surprised. There is such a man, it's really useless. The others also contemptuously shook their heads, secretly watching Stephen's back. Especially those two girls thought in their hearts, if my future husband was so useless, he would have kicked him away. Stephen was a little annoyed when he heard that. Looking back at Hazel's face was quite bad. Hazel usually satirizes a few words. When there is no one. As a brother-in-law, Stephen usually doesn't bother to care about her, but in public, it is a matter of character to slander him like this. Dad, I want that dress. Just as Stephen was about to say something to Hazel, Moana suddenly pointed to a set of snow-white children's clothing. Yeah. Stephen nodded, turned, and walked towards the children's clothing Moana pointed to. Sir, this is Victoire silk clothing imported from Italy. It arrived the day before yesterday. Do you want to try it for your daughter first? The shopping guide beauty smiled and introduced it. Stephen nodded, and the shopping guide took off the children's clothes and was about to take Moana to try them on, when a couple came with a 3 or 4-year-old girl. Mom, I want this dress too. The little girl pointed to the white children's clothes in the hands of the guide and said. Waiter, wrap me up this dress. The rich woman said directly to the shopping guide. The shopping guide looked at Stephen, a bit embarrassed. After all, this dress was first seen by Stephen, and he was ready to try it on. Dad, I want this one too. When Moana saw someone robbing herself, she immediately pulled Stephen's hand and shook it. Sorry, my daughter has chosen this dress, and she is about to try it on. You can choose another one. Stephen said to the woman. Try it on? It's you poor people who can't afford it. You often come to try on. Many of the clothes are dirty. The woman snorted and looked at Stephen contemptuously. Stephen wears ordinary clothes, and the woman feels that people like Stephen cannot afford thousands of children's clothes. How can I know if it fits without trying on it? Hazel, who followed up, said uncomfortably. Although she doesn't like Stephen, she can't just watch Moana being bullied. Throw it away if it doesn't fit. What's the big deal? You have to put up a correct view of money for your children since you were young. I'm sorry, you shouldn't understand the life of the rich either. The woman looked contemptuously. Hazel and others. This is called cultivating children's correct outlook on money? Everyone's eyes widened. This woman's concept is really unique. I'm afraid you have to cultivate a prodigal son from an early age. You take my daughter to try it on. Stephen didn't bother to talk with women, like this kind of unreasonable woman, you can't tell her at all. Do you ask if she wants to sell it to you or to me? The woman sneered, looking at Stephen contemptuously. Then he turned to the guide and said, just now we have wrapped up 5 sets of clothes, which add up to nearly £40,000. If you dare to sell this clothes to him, we won't want the 5 sets. Also, we have to complain to your manager to see if your manager wants to protect you or fawn on me. the woman said arrogantly and turned to Stephen, her eyes full of provocations. Stephen's expression was calm, but Hazel and the others looked at the guide to buy them one after another to see what she said. Chapter 9. I bought it all. The shopping guide was a bit hesitant at first, but when she saw the face of the rich woman, she finally turned to Stephen, pointed at the rich woman's daughter, and said, "Yes. This little sister is the first one. You should choose another one. It's obviously our Moana first. How can you open your eyes and talk nonsense? Don't you think they are the guests with more money? Are we anymore?" Hazel was impatient, so she stopped doing it. The shopping guide raised his mouth and sneered, "Customers also have to be divided into levels. People buy 6 sets at one go. If you can buy 6 sets at one go, of course I will be on your side. Anyway, they have violated their intentions, and the shopping guide has also been released." At first glance, Hazel has no purchasing power. How can he compare with a rich woman? On the side of the rich woman, she can get a lot of commissions. The rich woman smiled triumphantly when she heard that, and said sarcastically, "I heard that. I can buy 6 sets at once, can you? Don't make so many requests if you don't have money. If you want more services, just weigh yourself. My wallet." With a group of DCKs, I couldn't afford it at first glance, so I came to try it on purposely. The middle-aged man who had not spoken at this time looked at Stephen and others disdainfully. "Waiter, if you hear it, they simply can't afford it. Like this kind of deliberately trying on brand name clothes to satisfy vanity DCK, you shouldn't let them into affect the emotions of real consumers." Sneered again. "You." Hazel vomited blood. Although her family is not rich, it is not so poor that you can't afford to buy thousands of pieces of clothes. How could she bear this rich lady so scornful? But thinking that she wants to overwhelm the other party's limelight, she has to buy at least 6 sets of clothes for Moana. 1 or 2 sets are fine. More than 6 sets? She really can't afford it. Mark could afford it, but he wanted to watch Stephen's jokes, so he stood silently on the side. As for the other girls, they are almost the same as Hazel. 1 or 2 sets are no problem. The most important thing is that they are mainly aimed at Stephen and have nothing to do with them. I don't have the ability, so I have to bring Moana to this place. Now it's all right, shame on it. Seeing the shopping guide preparing to pack the clothes that Moana liked, Hazel was angry directly on Stephen. In her mind, her brother-in-law is completely useless, just to vent her anger. "Did I ask you to pack it? My daughter hasn't tried it on yet. What are you packing?" Stephen ignored Hazel and said instead, looking at the guide. Let alone the rich woman's behavior, but the attitude of the shopping guide made him feel sick. Besides, Moana liked this dress at first glance. As a father, and there is a father who can meet his daughter's requirements, he can't disappoint his daughter. "Still trying on? You won't really be like this," elder sister said. "You can't afford it. In order to satisfy your vanity, did you come to try on deliberately?" "Handsome man, I didn't say you, so you are not afraid to give. Does the child bring any bad effects?" The shopping guide looked back at Stephen with a look of contempt. "Which one of your eyes sees that I can't afford it? Isn't it just that they bought 6 sets at once? You are so powerful." Stephen was a little angry, afraid that it would have a bad influence on the child. "The young master still doesn't know how to teach children, so I want you to educate them." "Why, young man, do you want to play with me?" The middle-aged looked at Stephen playfully. Seeing Stephen's angry look there, he has a sense of superior achievement. Stephen looked back at the middle-aged, his eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, how do you want to play?" Hazel took Moana's hand and said, "Moana, go, Auntie will take you to another place to buy. We will buy 2 sets. If Stephen wants to stay and get a face, let him go. Do you have any abilities in mind? This couple looks like a rich man. Do you still want to play with others? What do you use to play with others?" "Auntie, really?" Moana looked at Hazel happily. Hazel nodded, and Moana pulled Stephen's hand again and said, "Dad, let's go to buy it with my aunt." Although she can't listen to the conversation between adults. Yes, but she can still feel the other person arguing with her father. Brother-in-law, do you want Moana to see that you were slapped in the face? You can be shameless, but you don't want Moana to see these shameful things, okay? Hazel met Stephen still not giving up. The anger suddenly came again. Moana just likes this dress. If I can't even satisfy her, how can I be a father? Stephen took Moana's hand and looked at Hazel and said. Then you also want to learn from others to buy 5 or 6 sets. The meaning of their shopping guide is so obvious, don't you understand? Hazel looked like she hated iron and steel. If Stephen wasn't her brother-in-law, she wouldn't care about it. She has always looked down on her own brother-in-law, feeling that Stephen has no ambition, but anyway, her sister likes him. Moana is also 3 years old, and of course she would not watch him get beaten in the face by outsiders. Boy, you still listen to your sister-in-law. I feel a little compelling. If I slap it off, there will be no place for your face. Looking at Hazel's scared look, middle-aged people are very proud. Yes, if you don't have any points in your heart, don't come out and pretend to be compelling. If there is a saying, if you have the ability to pretend to be compelling, then you are awesome. If you don't have the ability to pretend to be compelling, then you are stupid. Said with a joking smile. She turned to the guide to buy again. For people like this kind of people who don't have a lot of points in their hearts, it's better to go out, so as not to affect the buying mood of other customers. The shopping guide was convinced and nodded. Said to Stephen, you should leave as soon as possible, don't affect our guests. Moana, do you like the clothes here? Stephen asked her daughter without reason to guide her shopping. Moana nodded. Stephen smiled slightly, and said, then I will buy all of them for you, and you will get a new one day later. Good, good. Moana said excitedly. Hazel's mind was shocked. Is this trash brother-in-law crazy? Buy it all? Do you think you are getting rich? Brother-in-law, if you don't listen to advice, I'll call my sister right away. Hazel was so angry that she had to take out her mobile phone and call her sister. Okay, young man, I will give you full marks for this pretense. By the way, if you can really buy all the clothes in the shop here, I will kneel and apologize to you. The middle-aged man haha smiled. My old lady kneels down to lick your shoes. The rich woman also said jokingly. Stephen's outfit is just a set of hundreds of thousands, just an ordinary salaryman. How could their husband and wife look at it? I'm afraid your husband and wife will cry later. Stephen sneered, then turned to another shopping guide who had not spoken. Let me do the math. I bought all the children's clothes in your store, Stephen said. Ah? Really buy it all? The shopping guide looked at Stephen in surprise, and couldn't believe it. I've done it a long time ago, plus a few sets selected by this elder sister, totaling 520,000. Do you pay in cash or swipe your card? The previous shopping guide looked at Stephen jokingly. Stephen looked at the other shopping guide, 520,000. The shopping guide nodded. Okay, swipe your card, it's all on your head. Stephen said and walked to the revenue desk. The shopping guide had come back to his senses and followed in shock. Let me go, he won't really be able to afford it. The middle-aged couple was a little confused. This kid didn't look like someone who could buy clothes with hundreds of thousands. Hazel and the others also opened their eyes wide, and Stephen's firm expression made them not calm. Sir, if you buy so much at once, I can give you a discount, and you can pay £500,000. The shopping guide said, suppressing his excitement. Stephen nodded, but when he took out his wallet, he suddenly found that his MasterCard had been left at home and had forgotten to take it with him. Oh my day, won't be so unlucky. Chapter 10. Supreme Card. Why, pretending to be too much, are you swiping your card? Seeing Stephen staring at his wallet, another shopping guide sarcastically asked. She didn't believe that Stephen could really afford 500,000. Seeing that there seemed to be no bank card in Stephen's wallet, she immediately laughed. The rich woman and wife finally breathed a sigh of relief. To be honest, Stephen's confident eyes just now really shocked them. They let out a word, as long as Stephen can buy all the clothes here. One knelt down to apologize, and the other knelt down to lick his shoes. called Lawrence's shopping guide wry smile. To be honest, she doesn't believe Stephen anymore. But adhering to the spirit of professional ethics, even if Stephen didn't buy a single piece of clothing in the end, she wouldn't say anything. Sir, if you don't swipe your card yet, please leave immediately and don't affect our business. The first shopping guide said coldly. If you have no money to pretend to be struck by lightning, get out now, maybe you can save some face, don't wait a while to attract more people to watch, then you will have no place to show yourself. The rich woman shook her head contemptuously and saw Stephen showed her true face, and she also lost the interest in continuing to beat Stephen in the face. Stephen looked at the rich woman, and when he turned out Thomas's phone number about to dial out, he saw a bald middle-aged man approaching him. Chief Callum, it's you. Seeing the bald head, the middle-aged immediately greeted him with a smile. Bald took a look at the middle-aged, without saying anything, and walked straight to Stephen. The middle-aged man looked embarrassed, and he didn't know what to say. Husband, who is he? The rich woman frowned and asked in a low voice. Her husband is also a well-connected person. She didn't expect that the bald head would not give her husband any face, which made her a little angry. Callum, the general manager of this commercial building, behind the consortium is Electron Group. The middle-aged said in a low voice. The rich woman nodded. It turned out that she was such a big man. No wonder she didn't give her husband face. Let alone the Matrix Heights group, it was just in this commercial building. Back then, the couple had no way to rent a storefront. Does he also come to buy clothes for his children? The rich woman saw Callum walking towards the cashier, wondering. It should be. The middle-aged nodded, and Callum finally walked in front of Stephen. Mr. Stephen, it's really you. I thought I was wrong. The bald head looked at Stephen respectfully. You are. Stephen looked at Callum with some confusion on his face. My name is Callum, the person in charge of Oldwood Commercial Building. Callum replied respectfully. A few days ago, Thomas convened all the senior executives of the Matrix Heights Group in St. David for a high-level meeting. The main content of the meeting was to announce that Stephen had inherited the George family's fortune and showed various photos of Stephen. Let all high-level officials show respect when they encounter Stephen, and don't flood the Dragon King Temple by the time. As the person in charge of Oldwood Commercial Building, Xing Zhong certainly also participated in that meeting. So seeing Stephen coming to his commercial building to shop, he couldn't wait to come over and say hello first. Hazel and others didn't know Callum, so there was no response. But when the middle-aged people saw that the boss of the dignified commercial building was even more respectful to the youth they had been laughing at, his face instantly turned pale. Even the criminal soldiers have to bow and respect. What kind of status is that? Is it a big figure in the Electron Group? Oh, I see. Stephen nodded. After inheriting the family property, of course he knew what properties the Electron Group had, and it was not surprising that Callum knew him. Mr. Stephen, this is the only Supreme VIP card in the commercial building. You can use this card for shopping in the future. With this card, you can choose any item at will. The commercial building will settle the settlement with the owner of the merchant at the end of the month. Callum took out a card made of pure purple gold. Pass it to Stefandeo. Stephen took the card and looked at it and asked, Can I buy all the children's clothing in this store with this card? Yes, as long as you show this card, you can take everything away. Callum nodded hurriedly. This Supreme card is a symbol of status. It was originally designed to be used today. Well, then pack all the girls' clothes for me here, and donate the boys' clothes to the orphanage. Stephen said. The two shopping guides were completely shocked, and they didn't come back for a long time. Stephen didn't bring a bank card, but his Supreme card was recognized by all the staff in the entire commercial building. The video of this card was often played on the walls of the commercial building. The bosses of all shops also emphasized it. As long as someone is holding this card to buy things, no matter what, they can't collect money. What are you still doing? Packing. Callum quietly rebuked when seeing the two shopping guides still there. The two of them reacted and hurried to select the women's clothing to pack. Even the cashier, after taking down the bill, also joined the packaging work. Callum took out the phone to call someone to donate the men's clothing to the orphanage. At this time, Stephen slowly looked at the middle-aged couple.